Honest answers to awkward questions with Lucy Maskell. Sponsored by Urban Saints.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Premier Gospel Music for Life, and this is the show where we give honest answers to awkward questions. My name's Lucy, and I'll be presenting today's show, which is all about eating disorders and how we can help young people going through them. What happens when you find a girl from your youth group intentionally starving themselves or a boy making themselves throw up? We're going to be chatting about these issues and more on today's episode, The Hunger Games. I'm very privileged to have in the studio my special guest today, Emma Scrivener. Emma has written a book called A New Name, in which she shares her experience of anorexia. She also authors a well-known blog that has gained reputation for helping people of all ages struggling with eating disorders. So please welcome Emma Scrivener. Hi Emma, how are you doing?
Hi Lucy, I'm doing all right, thank you. I'm quite excited to be here.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming all the way from sunny Eastbourne. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, although it wasn't sunny when I left.
Oh, okay. Well, we can pray about that. So, Emma, tell me more about yourself. Tell me more about your story. We want to hear everything.
Okay, well, you can probably hear from my dulcet tones I'm not from these parts. I grew up in Belfast, which if you haven't been, you should go to. It's awesome, and I'm not even sponsored by the Northern Ireland Tourist Board. I grew up in a very loving family, a non-Christian family, and let me see, if I was going to describe myself, well, I've got a younger brother and sister, and I guess my brother's the good-looking one, my sister's got the brains, and I've always been the good one. And, you know, people who are good tend to be the ones who don't have anything else to bring to the table, so they go down that route.
Not sure about that, Emma. Not sure about that.
I know, absolutely. But that's me. So growing up as a wee girl, you'd have seen somebody who was very intense and who wanted to fit in. I think back to things like I remember going into the sand pit when I was wee, and the other kids were there, and then shooing them all out and guarding the sand pit and then smoothing the sand over with my hands.
Wow, you're quite king of the castle, or queen of the castle there.
Well, yeah, I guess really for me it's about order and about being in control. I'm the sort of person, I like things to have boundaries and neat lines. I like to know where I stand. I like to know that I fit. And certainly as a child, that was very much my experience. Up until about the age of 12, 13, which is when some things happened in my life, some changes that really rocked my sense of who I was. So just normal things that happened to other people, nothing dramatic. The first thing was that I became a Christian. Found out about God, but not really about Jesus, about a religion that talked about rules and performance, somebody who saved me, but the rest was kind of up to me. So I thought of God a bit like a headmaster in the sky. So that was my idea of religion. Other things changing, I moved schools from a primary school where I knew where I fitted to a girls' school where I had to work. Well, I worked really hard, but no longer fitted in, and brains were no longer enough, and I wasn't cool, never have been.
Did you feel like you basically were the odd one out and you didn't fit in, you weren't sure who you were, I think?
Yes, I think very much. So, I'd look on magazines. I mean, it's puberty, so my body was changing, but it didn't look like the women that I saw on TV. Sadly, I've inherited my dad's chest, still have. And so the bits of me that should have stuck out didn't, and the bits of me that were meant to go in didn't. And I remember thinking, well, I don't look like a woman, and I don't fit in at school anymore either. And just all the stuff about, are boys interested in you, are you funny, what is life all about? I remember my granddad died at the same time. It was the first time I'd lost anyone close to me, and so thinking for the first time as well, what is life all about? So many things that changed around, and moving home, and just this sense of my body spilling out and me on the inside spilling out as well. So everything feeling messy. And for that wee girl who wanted to fit into the sand pit, who wanted things neat and tidy, it felt like I really wasn't anymore, and being good wasn't good enough.
And how old were you when you finally came to a head where you thought, actually, everything is falling apart, I feel I'm falling apart? How old were you then?
So I would have been about 13, I guess. About 13, when all these different things were going on. And And I suppose I was looking for a word for my mess, the mess that was on the outside, my body, the mess that was on the inside, my feelings, where do I fit, what's life all about? Everything just seemed to be messy. I felt messy. And the word that I came up with was the word fat. So fat for me it wasn't just about looking in the mirror and seeing a shape that I wanted to change. It was about messiness internally and externally, about all the questions that I had and couldn't answer, about all the ways that I was wrong and all the ways it didn't fit. And so it seemed to me that if I could make myself less fat, then I could also tidy myself up. Like I was the stain, and I could mop it up. If I could make myself smaller on the outside, I could also fix these questions on the inside. And instead of having 101 things that I couldn't answer, what's life about? Why don't boys like me? Why don't I fit? Etc., etc. There was just one thing I had to focus on. Could I make myself smaller? And that was something I could do. It was something I could control.
You're in control of it. So again, you keep emphasising the word control. Is that what you think maybe eating disorders can be rooted in? Or we'll talk about that more in the later show, but what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think certainly, I can only speak from my own experience. I think eating disorders are about loads of different things. I think eating disorders generally are ways of using food to cope with and control life. In a sense, food's how I deal with emotions and pain. If I restrict it, I feel in control. If I overeat, it soothes me. If I get rid of it, if I purge, then I'm flushing away these scary feelings.
So binge eating as well, like you said, you just overeat, just high calorie foods and just go, oh, it makes me feel better. Yeah. That's kind of like a comfort thing. Yeah,
so I think eating disorders, control can be one thing, but really they're just about being human, about what you worship and about what gives you identity and worth, and just using food as a way of trying to answer a lot of questions that you have about the world and about yourself. As a teenager growing up, my family were brilliant and very supportive and helped me to get help. But this was Belfast, the 1990s, and we didn't really understand a lot about eating disorders. So the help that I got focused mainly on regaining weight, and I'd say that's vital. It's a really important part of recovery from eating disorders because they affect your brain, particularly with anorexia. If you lose a lot of weight, you can't think properly. So there's not much point in getting a lot of counselling and so on until you can get up to a stage where you can think things through.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for, again, sharing that part of your story and being so open. I think a lot of people will really appreciate your openness. So stay tuned, everybody, because we're going to be talking more about Emma's story. Her second part of what happened next. You can find out more after these songs.
Awkward. Honest answers to awkward questions with Lucy Maskell. Sponsored by Urban Saints.
Hello, welcome back to Premier Gospel Music for Life. This is Awkward, the show that gives honest answers to awkward questions. And today we're talking about the Hunger Games, aka eating disorders. My special guest is Emma Scrivener, who has been sharing her story about her battle with anorexia. Emma, thank you so much for your openness. So you've been talking about your early childhood, about your wanting for control and wanting to just really be loved. So thanks so much for sharing about that. Please tell us more about the second part of your story. What happened after you were 16?
Okay, so whenever I was, I guess when I was about 18, I'd had some treatment for anorexia, but it just focused on weight, and that meant that the questions that I looked a lot better, but the questions that I had, the fears and so on, were still there, even though I looked a lot better. So I thought, okay, I need to find something else that works here. I threw myself into religion. I went to Bible college and headed up some children's work, and I got engaged to a vicar in training who had told me he was going to be a rock star first. So
wow, he sounds like a bit of a character.
He is indeed. Yes, and I think we looked like a pretty good couple, but actually, although I was teaching about grace, I still had this picture of God as someone I had to be good for, and so I didn't really get the gospel. My husband got a job in Eastbourne, and he was going to be a vicar, which would have made me a vicar's wife. And I was really terrified about that.
What were you scared about with the label vicar's wife? Is it all the stereotypes, expectations?
Yeah, I think so. I think all the vicars' wives I've ever known have been amazing women, and I don't even know what a woman looks like, let alone a godly one. So the thought of being, someone who is kind and nice and open home and, can bake and can do all of these amazing things. That's not me.
Like a Wonder Woman, you had this expectation of, I've got to have like octopus legs and do baking, pick up these people, help this community, etc.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of pressure, especially when you think a lot of vicars' wives really aren't like that, right?
Oh, well, I mean, I certainly am not. And I think, but I think a lot of the pressure sort of came from within, really. And there's for me, there's a lot of pride in that as well. But anyway, I got really scared. And because I was scared, I went back to my old patterns. Only this time, I didn't have a mum and dad there to kind of force feed me spaghetti. And I think it's very difficult to help someone as an adult who has an eating disorder and doesn't want to get help.
There is, isn't there? It's hard if someone doesn't recognise they have a problem or that they want help, isn't it? What do you do in that situation?
Well, I mean, I guess we'll get on to this in a second. What you do. I think at that time, we did try to get help, but there were difficulties in that when I tried to get help at the doctors, they said, to be honest, you're not sick enough yet to qualify for care, just because, and it's a question of resources.
Wow, does that happen quite a lot then, Emma? Like, I'm quite shocked to hear that people would say you're not ill enough. Like, how ill is ill enough?
Well, I mean, anecdotally, it seems to happen, and again, I think, with the best will in the world, again, there's massive waiting lists. Eating disorders are a massive problem. 1.6 million people in Britain affected by them.
Wow.
And so the way that it often works is that you have to get really, really sick to qualify for care. But at that point, you no longer want to get help. And certainly that's what happened with me. When I wanted to get help, I wasn't able to access it. And then when I did go on and lose more weight, I no longer wanted the help. So it's sort of a catch-22 situation. What
was your feelings then? Did you not want help because you just wanted to be by yourself? You thought no one understands. Like, what were you thinking at that time? Am I asking?
Well, I think an eating disorder is, it's very much like an addiction in the sense of it is everything to you, and it was everything to me. I mean, I loved my family. I thought I loved the Lord and my husband, and these were all people who wanted me to get better. But earlier I mentioned the things that the eating disorder did for me. It gave me identity, it gave me a sense of purpose, and a normal sense of being in control. And for the sufferer, an eating disorder is not a problem, it's a solution. And that was the case for me. It made my life work, it made sense, and it felt more powerful than anything else. So beside that,
power again, the power control. You keep saying these words, so yeah. I want to talk more about that. Like, did you feel you were in charge of what was going on in your life when things around you weren't?
Yeah, I think so. And, I guess it's a sense of you can't control the world, but you can control your own body. And there are physiological things that happen there as well. There's what's known as the whirlpool effect with anorexia, which is when you lose a lot of weight, chemical changes affect your brain. I mean, it distorts your thinking. So you become paranoid. It's a lot more difficult for you to think rationally about food and weight. Similarly, if you're binging and purging, so if you're eating an awful lot of food and then getting rid of it, that also sets up biological patterns in your body where you get sugar highs and then you crash. So you feel very guilty, but then maybe you starve yourself for a long period and then you get hungry again, so then you eat far too much, then you feel guilty, then you make yourself sick.
It's like a roller coaster of emotion.
Very much, very much. And these things are all a part of it, as well as the psychological fact that it's a mental illness.
Definitely. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that part of your story. We'll come back after a few songs and we'll chat more about how now, today, in 2014, how can we reach out to young people who are struggling with anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, or any other kind of eating disorder. So I want to hear your thoughts. If you're listening, let me know, what are the signs someone has an eating disorder? Have you got a story you'd like to share, maybe from your own experience? Maybe you've got a friend at school or a friend in the family that is really struggling with this. Maybe you've got questions for Emma. Please phone me with your thoughts and text me your questions so I can grill Emma on them as well. So she's quite the guru on the subject. So phone me with your thoughts. Phone me with your thoughts on 0207 316 0101. That's 0207 316 0101. Or you can text me your questions. So put your first word as gospel and then your message, and you send it to 66777. That's 66777. First word gospel and then your message. Or you can tweet me instantly at Premier Gospel, or you can post a message on facebook.com/Premier Gospel. Please could you tell us more about the signs of eating disorders, how we can spot it in young people? Because it's quite hard, isn't it? It can happen to all ages, all different genders, right?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, and it depends on there are different kinds of eating disorders as well, so they take very different forms. I think one thing that's important to say is that weight is a symptom, but it isn't the whole thing. So the stereotype is of someone who is anorexic, who's very, very thin, but actually another common eating disorder is bulimia, and someone who is bulimic, in other words, someone who will eat a lot and then purge by making themselves sick or losing laxatives or exercising, they'll normally be of a normal weight, so it's not something that you can spot from the off. Yeah.
What signs do we look for? Because I remember reading your article. Thanks so much for your article, by the way, on freshthoughts.co.uk. You wrote about how people can sometimes leave wrappers of food everywhere, or they kind of have bruising on their knuckles. Is that right?
Yeah, well, there are different signs for different eating disorders. I suppose things to look for would be weight loss or unusual weight changes. Someone who wears baggy clothes to hide their body, or it could be someone who's trying to draw attention to their own body. It could be someone who is interested, this is particularly with anorexia, someone who's interested in cooking but not eating. So quite often, I remember for myself reading cookery books, because it's a way of getting food without actually taking in the calories. So it could be someone who cooks a lot for other people but doesn't actually eat themselves. Other potential signs, things like missing meals, eating very little or in secret, avoiding fattening foods. For most eating disorders, the person will often deny any problem. They may become very upset if they're confronted. When dealing with something like binge eating or bulimia, you could be looking for things like large amounts of food disappearing, empty wrappers, stashes of high-calorie foods for binging. Going to the toilet after meals may smell of mouthwash or perfume to disguise the smell of being sick. Also sore throat or tooth decay, swollen cheeks or ankles, poor skin, bruising on knuckles from making yourself sick, personality changes, and often isolation, withdrawing from friends as well.
So how do I know, Emma? Let's say I am a young person at school at the moment, and I've got a friend who's showing all these symptoms, all these signs of maybe being a bit withdrawn, a bit secretive, kind of eating things but going to the bathroom and makes herself throw up. Like, how do I know what to do? Because it's quite a hard situation, especially if you're 16 years old, or how old you were when you had eating disorders. It's quite hard to deal with as a friend. What would your advice be?
Okay, well, I guess there's a number of things. The first thing I'd say would be I would always challenge the person gently but firmly. So I guess there's a couple of models you can take. You could be an ostrich. You could stick your head in the sand and pretend there's nothing happening. I wouldn't do that. Equally, you could be a rhino. You could go charging in.
Wow.
But I wouldn't do that either. I think a good model is of a dolphin, so someone who goes alongside the person and kind of gently nudges them. If you can explain that you're concerned about them and their health, I think that's really important. One reason is that often when you're in a grip of an eating disorder, it's hard to see that you've got a problem, and so other people challenging you gently is a way of drawing it to your own attention as well. The other thing is that the longer that they go on for, the harder it is to get help. So early intervention is important. Don't focus on looks or weight.
Why is that, Emma? Is that because people can have a kind of guilt trip about, oh, you look nice today, or they take it as a good thing?
Well, I suppose there's a number of things. One is eating disorders, as I've mentioned, are really about what's going on the inside as well as what's on the outside. So the person is, in a sense, writing on their body what they can't say with their mouth, and that is, trying to speak out things that feel very difficult, often emotions that feel very dangerous. So it's important for you to focus on their feelings and on the relationship that you have. Also, sadly, it's very hard for you to win. If you say you look thin, they might take as an encouragement. If you say you look fat, again, won't work very well.
Emma, I was going to say, when you talking about the compliments and, oh yeah, you look great in that, or oh, you look thinner today, you lost weight, well done. I've been looking on the internet for research for the show about Thinspiration Tumblrs, Thinspiration blogs. They're kind of blogs and websites, if you haven't heard them before, about encouraging people, no matter what age they are, to starve themselves. And I think some of them are bulimic as well, is that right? Some to do with bulimia?
Yep, absolutely. There's all sorts of sites for basically every kind of eating disorder. I guess it's an interesting one. I reckon eating disorders are, they're really heart issues. And I said this at the beginning, they're about, in some senses, what we worship. And I think this is sort of a case in point. Psalm 115 talks about you become like the thing you worship. And in a sense, this is feasting with your eyes on images of people who are, who are very thin or picking up tips from other people. I guess my view on them is I think they're very dangerous. I think that what's interesting is as well, there are prayers and things to things like the goddess anorexia. There are ways of picking up tips on
is it how to starve yourself, or kind of skip dinner, be thinner kind of tips?
Sure, yeah. I guess it's like online support for an eating disorder, and seeing it very much as a lifestyle choice, as opposed to what it actually is, which is something that can start as a choice but very quickly becomes an addiction, becomes something a lot darker.
Yeah.
So, my advice on it would be really just to stay well clear. I think they're very dangerous.
How do you help someone who maybe wants to keep it a secret? So, for example, a young person who's 16, let's say, at school, sees their best friend they're making themselves throw up, and then they say, hey, what's going on? And the person says, shh, don't tell anybody, otherwise I won't be your friend anymore. Let's say, what would you give your advice to that person?
Well, I guess as a friend, one thing that's very important is to be protecting yourself as well as the other person. I wouldn't, first of all, if someone's going to speak to you, don't promise secrecy to kick off with. But I think you need to get support for yourself as much as you do for the person. So don't try and handle this on your own. And I think it is important to ask other people for help so that you aren't isolated with that person yourself. You cannot rescue somebody who has an eating disorder. You can love them and support them. You can tell them that you're there and that you love them. You can pray for them, and that you can say, I want to help you get help. Let's go together to talk to someone. Let's make an appointment to go and see a GP. But you can't step in and force them to do something they don't want to do. I guess an important a picture of it is, if someone's drowning, you don't jump in the water with them. You need to stand on the bank, and that's important for someone who's trying to help someone else with an eating disorder too. So get support for yourself. And
what happens, let's say, if there isn't any support around, like there isn't a particular, I don't know, someone who's there, really, like a school nurse, for example, or a charity? Like, what do you do in that situation?
Well, luckily, there are plenty of resources that are online, and phone helplines as well. So we mentioned there's my blog. There's also National Centre for Eating Disorders, which is eatingdisorders.org.uk. There's BEAT, which is b-eat.co.uk. Lots of other places as well that have helplines and websites. Yeah. So it may feel like you're on your own, but you're really not. And a good thing to do is to phone up one of these helplines, or to talk to other people and explain the situation, see if you can get help there.
Definitely. Well, if you've got a question for Emma that you'd like me to grill her on to do with eating disorders, or maybe you've got questions about your family, your friends who may be struggling with it, text me. You can do that on 66777. That's 66777. You have to put the word gospel first and then your message. Otherwise, it might be sent to the person down the road, and that would be a bit strange. So 66777, first word gospel. You can also tweet me at Premier Gospel, which is at Premier Gospel, or you can post a message on our Facebook page, facebook.com/promogospel, or if you're very, very brave, phone me and we can talk to you live in the studio. 0207 316 0101. That's 0207 316 0101. So, Emma, I was reading on your blog, as well as many different websites, that apparently 1.6 million people in Britain are affected by an eating disorder, and between 14 to 25-year-olds, they are the ones most at risk. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah, so I guess that's true. But what's interesting as well is that the number of cases in men and in older people are also rising. So this is not just an issue for teenage girls, it's an issue really for everybody. All sorts of people, men, women, children, old people, and of course Christians. The most common eating disorder, although you hear a lot about anorexia, is actually bulimia. But if you turn up at a hospital, one of the most common diagnoses there is something called EDNOS.
What does that stand for?
So that stands for eating disorder not otherwise specified. And I think this is an important point about eating disorders. They don't necessarily fit into neat categories. So up to 60% of recovering anorexics will also struggle with bulimia. And quite often, as for people with EDNOS, you'll get features of one kind of eating disorder and features of another. So there's a whole load of different ones, like fear of sickness, night eating syndrome, loads of different eating disorders. They're just as distressing as the ones you might hear about. In fact, sometimes even more so because they're less widely recognised. And obviously, if you're not well, you want to know, well, what's the name for the thing that I've got?
Absolutely, because you put them in boxes. What have I got? This, and I know you're talking about also maybe self-harm as well, which can be related to anorexia as well. In our previous chat before the break, and I've got a text in actually. Do you mind me reading it out right now?
Sure.
Is that okay? I don't want to stop your flow there. So I've had a great text from someone who says, "How similar is cutting to anorexia?" They said, "I struggle with cutting, and a lot of how you described your eating disorder sounds similar. Does cutting make you more likely to stop eating as well, or vice versa?" So, in a nutshell, how similar is self-harming to anorexia? Do you mind
Sure.
giving, I don't know, maybe personal stories of that, if you know anybody who's been through that?
Well, I guess great question, and yeah, thanks for asking that. I think that's a really good point. A lot of what self-harming does, it fulfills the same function as an eating disorder. So, eating disorders do a whole load of different things. You could be trying to communicate dangerous feelings. You could be trying to get rid of emotions. You could be trying to change yourself. You could be trying to distract yourself. You could be trying to comfort yourself. You could be punishing yourself for having feelings, trying to gain control. You could be trying to feel something or affect other people or get help. Self-harm is often doing many of the same things. So it's very common for people who are struggling with eating disorders to also struggle with self-harm.
Wow.
And also with depression, obsessive compulsive disorder as well. They all go hand in hand. Yeah.
Why is this, Emma? Why is this all connected? Well, what's the root of it? Like, how come self-harm, depression, all these things are very related? What do you think is the root cause?
Well, I think quite often you hear about mental illness as if there's a really neat divide between a normal person and a person who struggles. I don't think that's true. A lot of these behaviours, they're all on a spectrum. Basically, we're all fallen people. We all struggle, we all have mess, and we all try to find ways of dealing with it. These are, although they're not great ways of dealing with it, they're a solution to the person who is using them. So they're all ways of trying to cope with very difficult emotions, trying to make sense of life, trying to make it work. And both eating disorders and self-harm, in a sense, you are punishing your own body for you're taking this onto yourself, really. It's a very visible way of signalling that you're in distress, and you can see what's going on in your own body as well. So Yeah, so that's important to remember as well. If you're struggling with a whole load of things like depression, or OCD or self-harm as well, it is not that you're going crazy. It's not that you've got 100 different problems that can't be solved. Very often it's just that there are some things on the inside and you're not sure how to handle them. And these are the ways that you've learned to cope.
I just want to say thank you so much to the person, they remain anonymous on the text, but thank you so much for texting that question in. Just know that you're not alone, like Emma said, and feel free to phone us up if you want to chat more, or you can check out Emma's blog actually, which is emmascrivener.net. The Scrivener is spelled, let me get this right, Emma, let me know if it's wrong.
Good luck.
Scrivener. Is that right?
That's lovely, well done.
So emmascrivener.net. And yes, check out the website for more really open blogs. So Emma, we talked about self-harm, we talked about depression. Could you tell me maybe some stories of people who've been really impacted by your blog or by your book? Because your book, A New Name, it came out, 2 years ago? Is this right?
Yeah, that's right.
2 years. And tell me the journey behind the blog and that, like what started it? Did you think, I'm just going to write all this down, or did someone encourage you?
They certainly did. Well, I am married to a bloke called Glenn, who is a very keen blogger, and my blog came about because I was a blog widow because he had one.
A blog widow.
Indeed, yes.
Wow.
We were we'd sit on the sofa in the evenings, and I'd look at him blogging away, and I think it was something that we had to do to make sure that I had something. So he said, right, Emma, I'm starting you off a blog. And I didn't want to do it. But, I started writing and found that as I did it, that I wasn't the only person who was messed up, that there were other people out there who also struggle like me. And that, I guess, was an encouragement then to keep talking, and the book grew out of that. The blog's been a great blessing to me. It's just lovely to talk to other people. And
how long have you been blogging for, actually, Emma? Is it 3 or 4 years? I was looking at the blog today and yesterday, actually. It's very, very inspirational. I love how you have the layout, you have just a simple picture and a few words. Sometimes you have even stories, don't you, from other people in poems. I really like that.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the blog is a simple layout because my brain has a simple layout as well. But yeah, I think it's just a place to. As I said, I'm a messy person, and it's just a place to.
Aren't we
think
all?
through.
Hey?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And with a lot of mental health stuff, with a lot of struggles, there's so much shame attached to these things. It is hard to say, I struggle with this or I struggle with that. There's a lot of pressure to have it together.
Absolutely.
So it's an easy way of being able to talk these things through and to say, hey, I messed up, is anybody else struggling with the same thing, and to get wisdom from other people.
Definitely. I think it is important, isn't it, to have that community or have a friend you can be open with, because I think when we have secrets, whether that's, like you said, it could be cutting, it could be making yourself throw up, or just struggling with your body image, I think when we bring it into the light, that's when true freedom can begin, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I guess in the early days, whenever I thought God was like a headmaster, I really thought that Christianity was about having things together and about being good and having answers.
I used to think that too,
Yeah.
I used to think, it's all about being a good person, walking your ladies across the road, being a more good person. Why would I want to do that? That's boring. Let's be a rebel.
Well, if that's what a Christian is, then I'm afraid I'm stuffed.
Socks and sandals, eh?
Yeah, it's being a Christian is about being messy. It's about coming to the Lord Jesus and going, do you know what? I can't save myself, but hey, you can. And it's and that's the point about being Christian. You don't need to have the answers, and you don't need to have it together. You are accepted. You are loved as you are.
Absolutely. So are there any Bible passages that have really helped you in your recovery from anorexia at all?
I guess, there's the Bible talks to absolutely everything, and of course there are particular passages that talk about honor God with your body and so on. But in a sense, looking at the Bible is a wee bit, it's like a wee bit like the recovery process itself. The whole Bible is an ongoing meal. there's not just one morsel or one verse.
It's a love letter from God. It sounds cheesy, but that's how I see it, right?
Yeah, very much, very much. This morning in church we were reading through Hebrews, and Hebrews 4 talks about a great high priest who's gone through the heavens, Jesus,
Yes.
who's able to sympathise with our weaknesses, who has been tempted like us in every way, yet is without sin. Because of him, we can approach the throne of grace with confidence to receive mercy and grace in our time of need. We come to Jesus with our issues, and he accepts us as we are, and he gives us mercy and grace. And he's a Lord who understands what it is to be weak. He understands what it is to be broken. The symbol of our faith, the heart of our faith, is a Saviour who is broken. It's a symbol of shame and a symbol of suffering. And here's a God who on the cross gets what it's like to be messy, gets what it's like not to have those answers. If anyone's going to understand, he is, and he does. And we come to him, and he never turns us away. And that's the gospel. That's the good news.
That's the good news. It's not bad news, like you said, with, you've got to be this perfect person, you've got to be good enough. And like you said, the reality is we all struggle with things, whether we're Christian or we believe different faiths. We all have messed up issues, things from our past, present, future, maybe worried about. But God's like, it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. I think a really great passage as well is from the Psalms. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." That Hebrew passage, I think, is, like you said, really key about our weaknesses. Like, why do you think sometimes we have maybe this perfectionism or this bar of where we're meant to be? Because I think you were talking about before, eating disorders a lot to do with control and trying to be, the best kind of thing.
Can be. Again, I mean, I can't speak for other people, but here's what it feels like for me. I remember sort of in eating disorder recovery, one of the things that I was asked to do was sort of, and a lot of the professional help I got was really, really useful. But one thing that didn't help me so much was being told, look within, look to your own strength. I don't know about other people. I look within, and there isn't strength there. There's weakness. There's someone who has more questions than she does answers. There's someone who is confused, who's often lonely and frightened, and who screws up.
Absolutely.
And I think it's frightening to admit to that. It's frightening to be yourself, because I'm scared that if I'm honest about who I am, that people will not accept me. And so weakness and vulnerability, wanting relationship with other people so much, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved, and yet thinking, can I be? That's really terrifying. But incredibly, the gospel is that at the point of our weakness, at the point where we run out of answers, at the point where we're broken, that is where the Lord works. His grace is enough for us. His power is made perfect in our weakness.
Wow.
And amazingly, it's in our weakness that we are then strong, which is topsy-turvy, but then I guess that's the gospel as well.
It is upside down, isn't it? Upside down pie. I think as a youth worker, how would I use those Bible passages to share with someone, like a young person maybe feeling very vulnerable, very, alone in their anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, whatever it is? Do I just say, hey, Matthew 10:29 says, we have our hairs numbered, so God cares about everything about us? Or Psalm 139, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. I mean, is that going to do anything? Or, what do I do?
Well, absolutely use the Bible. But I think one thing to remember for people with eating disorders, they're full of shame, and they have very high expectations of themselves. There's a tape in their head already going, you're rubbish, you don't live up to what you should be, you're not a good Christian, how can you say you're a Christian, you've got an eating disorder?
A lot of guilt, isn't there? A lot of guilt
masses,
and shame.
Masses.
Emma, can I just quickly interrupt you? Sorry there, you've got a lot of good stuff. I have a text in saying, thank you, Emma, for your honesty. And I just want to say thank you as well. I want to concur with that. I've also got another question which says, through talking about biopass and things, can you offer any practical tips for getting through it when it really feels like, you're at crunch time, you want to have a way out? What's your tips there?
Okay, number one is you're not on your own. Recovering from an eating disorder, I know it's black and it's horrible, and you feel there's no way out, and you feel like it's absolutely impossible. It really isn't. But it's a question of going a step at a time. I don't know about you, but I get frightened even looking at tomorrow. I can't do it. And I think about Jesus saying, pray for daily bread. Go a step at a time and don't look too far ahead. Ask for help from other people. For a long time I really thought I can get better by myself, and I don't think that's true. I think we need other people to help us, a bit like when you get a spider trapped in the bath.
Don't talk about spiders,
okay,
Emma.
You get a small frog in your bath, and he's not going to get out of there unless you reach down and pick him out.
Don't kiss him either. You might not be a prince. Carry on.
But if you have people to help you who can reach down and help you, then you can get out. So ask people to help you. Don't try and do this alone. It'll take time, but you're getting better for something that is more than just improving your skin or being able to go out and get a curry or anything else. You're getting better for life. For finding out who you are and what you've been made for, and the Lord is with you in that, and he will help you step by step. And really happy to chat to you through the blog. If you want to send me an email, I'd love to talk in more detail.
Definitely. And if you've just tuned in, I've got my special guest Emma Scrivener talking about eating disorders. If you want to check out her blog, it's emmascrivener.net. That's SCRIVENER.net. So we're going to come back after this song. But if you've got any questions, please text us in, because this is an issue that someone in your life you will face, whether it's a friend or a colleague or a young person will face. So please text me, first word gospel, to 66777. So first word gospel plus your message, 66777. Or go on Twitter, twitter.com/Premier Gospel. Tweet me your thoughts, your comments. Do you think having an eating disorder means that you're more concerned with your image, or is it more than that? Or what do you think about Emma's thoughts and sharing her story? Anything you'd like to share? And if you want to put a Facebook post, go to facebook.com/Premier Gospel and just add a comment there. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Premier Gospel, Music for Life. This is Awkward, the show that gives honest answers to awkward questions. And what a night we've had tonight. We've been chatting about the Hunger Games, aka eating disorders, and how we can help young people who are going through anorexia, bulimia, or anything else that is troubling them. So my name's Lucy Maskell. We've only got till 7 o'clock. Emma Scrivener, who is an online blogger who has battled with anorexia and has written a book on it called A New Name. Check out emmascrivener.net, her blog as well, is in the studio with me. So Emma, we've been chatting loads about your story, about the signs young people face and what to do if you're really, really struggling. Can I ask, there are a lot of myths about eating disorders, and what are the common myths? Because I was thinking one of them is, like in the song we just had, it's all about maybe being a teenage girl who's struggling with her body image. But is that always the case with eating disorders?
Absolutely not. They affect all ages, all genders, ethnicities, and each person will experience them differently. So, for example, older people who have eating disorders, that can be quite common. One of the biological things that happens if you lose a lot of weight is it affects your thinking and your judgment. So even if you didn't start off, for example, with anorexia, it can develop out of that. So say older people, I'm emailing an older woman at the moment, and she developed anorexia because she just got unwell, lost a lot of weight, and that for her was the trigger then that picked up. So you can go into it from all sorts of different reasons.
And what about gender as well? Because I think we hear a lot on the news or media about how people with eating disorders are usually, like I said, girls or women, like you were talking about just then. What about guys? What are the maybe statistics, any kind of stories maybe you'd like to share about maybe men who are struggling with eating disorders?
Yeah, obviously they affect men as well. There's a good site called Menged, MENGED.co.uk.
Okay.
And I think that's a great place to look for guys. I suppose one thing is to I think it's a lot harder for guys to admit that they've got an issue. You know, there's because in some ways it's seen as a female thing, but also because some of the signs that are there for a woman aren't necessarily there for a guy.
Absolutely.
So, for example, you know, missed periods, things like that. Obviously,
Yes.
that's not going to affect as much, and people don't expect so much from a guy. So it can be more difficult for them to pick up. Often for guys as well, exercise is seen as a very good thing. Building lean muscles seen as a good thing.
Definitely.
Guys have a higher calorie requirement than girls, and they're able to lose weight more quickly. So alarm bells tend to ring a lot later for guys, but actually it affects them just as much as it does for a girl who's an eating disorder.
What are the other myths that you would say? So that's my myth of thinking everyone who struggles with anorexia, bulimia is a woman. What are other myths you've come across from your book and from meeting other people?
Well, there's a whole load, and I'd love to hear from other people what they've found as well. I guess myths about weight are pretty important. So if someone gains or loses weight, then they're recovered. No, eating disorders start in the brain long before the behaviours do, and you know, after, in my own experience anyway, once you get back to healthy weight, I think the emotional recovery takes a lot longer sometimes. I've heard from a friend, she says that, who's a GP, she says that, you know, it takes as long for many people to get better as it did for them to get sick in the first place. And that's important. So, you know, even after weight is restored, that does not mean that someone is doing fine. In fact, that's when they need more help rather than less.
Wow.
Because if you think about it, you know, the eating disorder has a function. It's a way of managing life. Now, if you take that away, if they're not using the same behaviours, but they've still got the same problems with the same issues, then actually you're feeling in a much worse place than you did before. So whenever your weight's back, that is precisely the time when you need more help rather than less, particularly because you'll be worried that, you know, it's just about my body, it's just about what I look like. People won't hear me in the same way if my weight's back. And of course, because there are so many eating disorders that aren't about losing weight, or where your weight will look very, very normal.
Thank you so much for your comments on that comment. I was going to say, with sufferers then, people who really do struggle with it, is it true that they'll all look like the people in the magazines, like extreme weight loss? You see all these big posters of people with their bones sticking out. Is that always the case with eating disorders? Is it that easy to detect?
No, of course not. I mean, of course, with some eating disorders are easier to spot than others. If someone, for example, struggles with binge eating, you know, it's quite likely that you'll be able to see it on them. They'll
Yes.
look bigger.
Yeah.
If someone is seriously anorexic, you may be able to see it on them. But as I've mentioned before, bulimia, you know, that's one of the most common ones, and yet most people with bulimia are of a normal weight. And actually, somebody has to get very, very unwell to be at the point where you can spot their bones. So it starts in the head before it can be seen in the body.
So anything else you would like to give to our listeners that would be helpful? Any resources, any other websites, or maybe books out there that people can log on to?
On my blog, there's a list of different websites and resources there. I think the main thing I would say is that if it's you and you're struggling, you really are not alone. You're not uniquely messed up. You know, it's okay to be messy. It's okay to be who you are, and there is help available. But please do talk to somebody, you know, a friend, or email me, or contact one of the organisations that we've mentioned. There is hope. It takes time. It's hard work, but you can do it, and you're not on your own.
Thank you so much, Emma, for being in the studio talking with us today about A New Name, your book on your struggle with anorexia, but also the great things God has done through your blog. Please check out emmascrivener.net. That is Emma and then SCRIVENER.net. I will post a link on the Facebook page. That's facebook.com/premiergospel, and the Twitter feed as well. I'll post all the links you need. But for now, I wanted to leave you with a Bible passage which is very familiar. It says Romans 8:3-5-39, and it says, Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it is written, for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. Know that whether you're struggling with it or no one who is struggling with it, you're not alone, and that God loves you very much. Thanks for tuning in to Awkward. This is Lucy Maskell signing out. Tune in next week for another special guest and another awkward topic.